Alright guys, so this video is going to show you guys how to um, determine if you have a parallel and perpendicular line with respect to another one, okay? So I'm going to go over how to tell visually and how to tell through equation, okay? So it's pretty simple, it's not too bad, but let's see if you guys could catch on pretty fast, okay? So, alright, so let's start off with some visual concepts. So we know that parallel. See if I remember how to spell this. Parallel. Pretty sure that's right. And we have perpendicular, right? Alright. So normally when we think of parallel lines, right, we just think of lines that go like this, right? So they're parallel. The definition of a parallel line is that um, they never intersect, right? So these two lines will go on forever, right? They'll never ever have cross, right? And we'll see how we could make sure that that's the case when we write their equations. But pretty much when you're looking at a graph, just make sure that they look kind of like a ladder without the little steps right there, okay? So they're never going to touch, they're never going to be like facing each other. So nothing like this where, um, you know, they're not touching on the graph, but you could tell one's going towards the other one, right? This is not parallel. You know, eventually somewhere over here they'll cross. So make sure you guys do understand uh, that concept, okay? So they're never going to touch even far on beyond to infinity, okay? Some other examples of a parallel line could be, and it's not limited to I'm not horizontal, but slanted lines, right? You can also have two, well, let me do it in a different color so it doesn't look weird. So you can also have two lines that are straight up and down, and these lines usually are in the form of x equals, right? So they have x equals some number right here. So both of these lines would be parallel if they both are just x equals, right? There's also the last case where we have um, horizontal lines, right? Or, hold on, I probably said whatever. So yeah, we have another case, right, where they can be horizontal, and as long as they're both y equations, so y equals, you know that they're going to be parallel as well, okay? So there's a lot of different cases where you can find parallel lines. Just make sure you guys are pretty comfortable with this kind of stuff as well, okay? But for the most part, you guys are going to work with stuff like this, okay? So I'm not too worried about you guys knowing this stuff right now, but make sure you guys understand that concept, okay? So let's look at cases where we have perpendicular lines, right? So there's only one or two cases I really have to go over. So one thing you have to understand about perpendicular lines is that they cross each other, yes, but they must cross each other at a 90-degree angle. So in other words, they need to be exactly crossing each other at a 90-degree angle. So they can't look like uh, they can't just be like two lines crossing like whatever. So let's say we had two lines like this. Uh, this is obviously not a 90-degree angle, and this is for sure not a 90-degree angle. So you know they're not perpendicular. They're crossing, sure, but they are not perpendicular, right? So that's some misconceptions people have. A lot of times my students will tell me that two lines are crossing and so they're perpendicular. No, it's not true. They need to be crossing at a 90-degree angle, okay? So be careful when you guys graph. Um, that can really mess you up, okay? Another case that you can have perpendicular lines is, of course, if you have... Man, I'm getting really bad at drawing. Okay, let me see if I can do this better. Yes. So another case would be if you had a, let's say, vertical line and a horizontal line, okay? So if you have a vertical and a horizontal line, so this one would be of the form y equals, and this one would be of the form of x equals, right? So if you have two exact opposite line equations, pretty much you know that they're going to be perpendicular for sure, okay? So usually that's what you see. So now, how can we tell if we have parallel lines, but when they're in equation form? So in order to tell with that, the key is pretty much look at the slope. Alright, so pretty much let's look at some examples. So let's say we have y equals negative 2x plus 3. Okay? Um, if I wanted to make a line equation that was parallel to this line, and they told me nothing about the y-intercept, they didn't care about the y-intercept, all they wanted to do is make me make a line parallel to it, all I have to do is make sure that my slope is exactly the same. Okay, I gotta make sure my y-intercept is different because at that point they would be the same equation, but pretty much I could choose whatever I want here as long as they don't tell me to do a specific point or something like that. But pretty much as long as my slopes are the same, this is gonna be a parallel line. Okay, so parallel if the slope is the same. So slope the same. And I mean exactly the same. It can't just be 2 and negative 2. It has to be exactly the same. So negative 2 and negative 2. Okay? Now let's say I wanted to make a perpendicular line to this top one. I'll do it a different color. I'll do brown. I never use brown. So let's say I wanted a perpendicular line. All I have to make sure, so I also have to look at the slope here, but all I have to make sure is that the slope that I use has to be a negative reciprocal. In other words, I need to make sure it's the opposite sign of this slope, and I gotta flip it because this is technically 2 over 1, so this one would change into a positive since this was a negative 1 over 2. So now you can see that 2 is actually on the bottom instead of the top, so it has successfully been written as a negative reciprocal as this. Okay, and then like I said, as long as they don't tell me certain points I need to use to make this equation, I could choose whatever I want. So I'll just choose negative 2 also. It doesn't really matter. This doesn't really affect if it's parallel or perpendicular at all. Okay, so perpendicular, so I'll put perp. You need to make sure that the slope is a negative reciprocal. I hope I spelled that right. If not, who cares? We're doing math. Alright. I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on that, if especially teachers watch that. Whatever. Alright, so that's pretty much it. So you can tell visually here through these methods, or you can also tell through the slopes of slope-intercept form equations, okay? So remember, if you want a parallel line, exact same slope, so you can see that these would have the exact same slope. So do these, and then, well, these are undefined, but they both still share an undefined slope, and then both of these have a 0 slope as well. For a perpendicular line, you got to make sure it's a negative reciprocal to this one, or whatever line you're working with. So you can see that since this was a negative slope, you would end up with a positive slope. Here you could see that this line compared to this one is a positive and this one's a negative, and it looks like they have the same slope. It's just going the opposite way, right? So so yeah, that's, I mean, if you want to talk about that more, you can ask me, but pretty much that's it. So those are the rules. All right, let me know if you guys have questions in the comments, and I will see you guys later. Peace.